This is the LightPath's podcast series about transformational paradigm shift, and it's my privilege to introduce Reverend James Pasmore.
Thank you, Genesis.
Welcome.
I'm looking forward to being here.
Me too. Reverend Jim, what do you mean by transformation of consciousness?
Well, there's a cultural paradigm right now of competition, separation, and what we're talking about is cooperation and unity, unification of all people everywhere. We're really all one family. We're one with nature. We're one with everything on the planet.
So, how can this series help me and the average person to transform society?
Well, the average person is the one that is transforming society. Most average people just want to have a better life, have the consciousness where it moves everyone forward at the same time. However, a lot of the problem is our politicians and our leaders. They're falling behind. So it's up to us as the average person to bring them along. We need to create a tsunami of consciousness that brings the entire world forward. And we can do that together.
Wow. I believe that, Reverend Jim. And what is the end goal of this series?
Well, what we would like is for us to connect, that is LightPath, to connect with all the other organizations out there. There's thousands of them doing like-minded work. So what we would like is to have all of this connected, where the consciousness of the entire planet is beginning to move forward. It's doing that already. But the goal is to bring all of our viewers along with us so that it's like ripples in a pond. It goes out further and further and affects more and more people. A global transformation.
The power of being interconnected with each other.
Exactly.
It's really transformative.
Interconnection is a critical factor. In fact, that's a perfect word to describe it. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Reverend Jim, what examples can you give from your life of a transformative experience?
Well, probably the most profound one that changed my life forever was a near-death experience. I can tell you that it's a story in my book called Flash, but I'm just going to tell you about it because it's a little quicker. Basically, I was traveling along a two-lane highway behind a car that was doing about 55 miles an hour, and I started to pass it on my 750 Honda motorcycle. And just as I got alongside, a car from the side of the road pulled out with an old guy driving that didn't seem to know what he was doing. He was probably as old as me. Anyway, bottom line is he stopped right there in the middle of the road. And I knew I was going to die. And because I knew I was going to die, apparently what happens in those cases is a lot of people will have an astral projection experience. That is, I left my body completely. And I relived my life in 3.5 seconds before the crash was imminent. And it was as though I was right there reliving each major experience in my life. And at the end of each section or each experience, the question would always be asked, where did you show love? And it was like, it wasn't somebody else asking it, it was me, my higher self, if you want to think of it that way, asking myself the question. Of course, sometimes I could answer it. I did a pretty good job, other times didn't do so well. So it changed my life forever as a result of that experience.
And hence the title of your book, Flash.
Flash.
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It was my life in a flash. Out of time, out of space, and yet still experiencing a reality that was a higher consciousness than my normal reality. It was like that was more real than the life that I live here and now.
Wow. I'm curious to know, how did that change your interpersonal relationships with your family and friends?
It changed it in every time I would have an interaction with anyone. The question was always, where do you show love? Isn't that the question we want to ask, always? In fact, I wrote a poem about it. If you'll bear with me,
Sure.
I'll read you the poem. It's called Timeless. With each soul comes a moment when life hangs in the balance. The arrow of fate quivers in aimless flight. All matter is up for grabs. Reality awaits the call. a destiny to be settled in seconds or years. No clock can measure the immeasurable now. That was immeasurable now. No soul knows the reason. Only eternal mind knows why the past leaps into the present and remains for a lifetime. And it's a sand clock as it drops the sand through. That's timeless.
It's amazing, Reverend Jim. I do like the word combination immeasurable now, which is, for me, it means being present all the time. And I feel, as I live my life in the flesh, being conscious with my own interpersonal relationships, being present means being, in the frequency of love at all times.
It does.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Reverend Jim, can you provide an example of ideas that you feel will accomplish peace and loving connection, despite the dramatic differences in opinions of our family and friends?
Yeah, I sure can, because like me, all of us, probably our listeners as well, have difficult people in their lives. Maybe their family, maybe their friends, relatives, whatever. And what I've found is that if I have something I don't like about that person, it offends me maybe even, or it's a very mean trait, let's call it that. If I focus on what their good traits are, let's say they have several traits you don't like, 99 traits and one you like. When you focus on that one trait, then when you come to see them or when you're together with them, that's what you'll draw out. I'll give you an example. I've got a friend I was visiting recently who is kind of what you'd call a curmudgeon, you know the word?
I do.
So he doesn't like kids very much. He doesn't like the shrill voice. He doesn't like dogs barking. Okay, he doesn't like situations where he can't be fully in control. And yet, this person is compassionate and caring, and he gives to charities constantly. He does what you call angel flights. He flies people to hospitals at no charge. So I focus on those qualities instead of the negative qualities. And when I'm with him, guess what comes out? And we have a good connection, a resonance, if you will.
That's such a great paradigm shift. It's certainly a challenge if we have a family member or friend that's acting beyond what we expect them to react in a certain circumstance, and here they are acting so differently. And we can come back to that connection with them through picking that or selecting to choose those amazing qualities that makes them the human being that they are. And so it's a good reminder, Reverend Jim.
Everyone has a spark of good in them. Everyone.
Yeah.
We just have to find that each time.
A great reminder. So here's a question. What if a relative or a friend becomes belligerent or argumentative?
So almost where we're at, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But in this case, I would say the first thing we want to do is try to diffuse that situation. The way you do that is with understanding. You let them know you understand where they're coming from, even if you don't agree with their opinion. Because remember that that person is expressing the way they are based on wherever they're at. They may be in a very difficult situation we don't know about, and they've just lost a loved one. Who knows what's going through their mind? So we have to have some compassion about that situation to begin with. And the next thing we want to think about is, what if it were someone that we loved very dearly? We would want to find a way to help them. So think about, again, what would love do? And that's the question we would always ask. What would love do? Try to understand them and recognize it's based on all of their life experience that's brought them to this point. And when you tell them that they're wrong about what they're doing, you're negating all that experience as well. Yeah.
It's a great spiritual practice to take things, not personally, just because we don't know exactly what's going on in people's lives, just like how you shared it. So, what are the sources of most issues and how can we deal with them?
I think you know a lot of them. Religion, right? Politics.
Right.
Think about when you've had difficult discussions, those two are certainly involved. Then there's the worldview, how we see the world. And then there's social media.
Right.
You know, social media can be good or bad, but more often than not, it's difficult. So let's take these one at a time. Let's start with politics, for example. If you think about the differences that we have with someone in politics, someone's right, someone's left, someone's center, whatever. Those differences, again, are based on that person's entire life experience, their family, the friends they had, the teachers they went, all of their cultural upbringing has brought them to this point they are now and the beliefs that they have now. And when you tell them they're wrong, you get into an argumentative state with them, they're going to defend that. So rather than tell them they're wrong, just tell them you respect their opinion, even if you don't agree with it. I understand that your life experience brought you to that. My life experience brought me to this. And you can help to defuse the situation that way, I believe. Oh, next one. We talked about politics.
We sure
Let's
did.
go to religion.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, so religion. How many religions are there in the world? My gosh, there's thousands of religions. Okay, I'll ask you, which one is right?
Mine.
Which one? Yours.
Mine, of
In my
course.
case, mine, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And so we'll talk about later getting beyond religious dogma and creeds. But when you're stuck with religious dogma and creeds, you really are arguing for something that you cannot expect the other person to fully understand or relate to because they were raised in a different religion, a different way of being. So the best you can do is recognize that we're all on different paths. I think the analogy I like to use is think of a wheel with all spokes in it, and there's a hub at the center, right? Let's call that hub God. Everyone's seeking God or universe or all there is, source, whatever you want to call it, right? So let's say we're all around the periphery, and you're coming from this side of the wheel, I'm coming from this side of the wheel, and you say, we're going opposite directions. But guess what? We're going to end up at the center, at the hub. Everyone is going to find their way to source at some point. That's my belief.
Yeah.
So we talked about social media.
Mhm.
This is a really difficult one for a lot of people because social media is profit driven. What that means is they want to get as many viewers as possible. How do they do that? I can tell you, unfortunately, the term in a lot of the reporters will be follow the blood. In other words, where is the bad news? What is the most sensational issue out there? That's the number one problem with the media, is that they need to make a profit, so they go for the bad news. That's what attracts us. It's not the happy kid skipping on the side of the sidewalk, it's the tiger in the bushes, right?
Mhm.
So number one is bad news in general. The second part of the problem is there's a lot of people that are putting out misinformation and disinformation. So misinformation may be inadvertent. They just don't know what they're putting out. It's wrong. Disinformation is where they're purposely distorting the information. And by the time it goes through all these forwards and bots and whatever else, you can't even trace the source of it. So I think the media is a big part of the problem. And I tend to try to focus on good news as opposed to the worst of the news, and try to let the really worst of the news roll off a little bit. It doesn't mean that I'm not compassionate. It just means that I don't want to transform my life into a negative picture of the world.
Right.
I've traveled to 67 countries around the world and to thousands of cities, and what I've found is that most people are all the same at a basic level.
Mhm.
They all want the same thing. They want their friends, they want their family, they want love, they want connection. So when it comes to the media, it's the tip of the iceberg that they're reporting. If they were reporting on the other 99.9%, it would be a good news for most of us.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Reverend Jim.
So the fourth one was worldview, as what I picture at least to be some of the major issues that we need to address. So if your worldview is that the world is basically bad, that people are basically born sinful, that they have traits that are negative, that's a worldview that's going to be difficult to reconcile with getting along with people, with being happy, with finding happiness in your life. However, let's take a look at a worldview where you see everyone as the same way that, let's say, Spirit sees them, perfect in the eyes of Spirit. That we're all born with love and light in our soul. And now we go forward with that type of view of the world. We're going to connect with people on a very deep level, and love is going to guide our way through. So worldview has a lot to do with how we get along with people.
It's amazing, Reverend Jim. You were talking about the news, the other side of the coin is the bad news, and then we have the good news. And for someone like me, who hasn't really, I haven't watched the news for a long time.
Good for you.
And so
I almost said, like when I was living in Australia, good on you.
Good on me, yeah. So I think for me, my question is like, how does, like an average person like myself who's, kind of like having a transformation of consciousness and not being able to, gather news, or chose consciously not to watch the news for whatever purposes. For me, it's just like a spiritual practice to have that innate wisdom in my own individual interaction with myself and other people. How are there any other sources of good news that we can tap into?
Well, there's certainly a lot of sources. You can get online and find many sources of good news. I use 1440 because it gives you just the headlines, so to speak, and I pick out the ones that I think I want to look at deeper, and then you just click on look at it deeper, and it goes into the full story. But at the end of every one, there's the good news. Okay, and then there's another source called All Sides. So if you're into politics, all sides, you want to know what all sides are. You want a balanced view, right? So they report from the left, the center, and the right. And you can get online and just say, sources of good news. Type it in. World Wide Web. Find it for you. Google's your friend.
Awesome. Thank you, Reverend Jim. So beyond the interpersonal relationships, how can we transform our society and culture on a global scale?
Well, the first thing is to recognize that we're all connected, that we're really all one at some deep essential level. And with that recognition, we can begin to share that consciousness with those around us, remembering that love is the answer to every question. So as we share that consciousness, that love, it begins to radiate outward. And we affect people in our vicinity, and it goes to our region, it goes to our state, it goes to our country, and it goes around the world. And that's the goal of all organizations like LightPath, is to transform the consciousness of the entire globe so that we have a more loving, connected globe. Because we know technology is not the answer. We know we're headed for a cliff if we just depend on technology. So we bring in consciousness. That's the only real solution. Technology can only get us so far. We need to change the consciousness of ourselves first and the world second.
Wonderful. Thank you. And also, the question is, but how can we be connected if we are of a different culture, political party, and religion? So.
Yeah, well, those are just egoic differences. Again, they're based on how you were raised, how you were programmed, the tapes that are playing in your subconscious mind. And so if we recognize that everybody has come to the point that they are in life based on all of past experience, we can't judge them for being wrong for having a past experience. What we have to do is just appreciate that and let them know that we care about them just the way they are. And if there's an ego getting in the way, I'll give you an example. I did some work with a couple that was having some difficulties, and they were coming at each other saying, this is what you did. You made me feel this way. And this is what you did. And back and forth, it's you did this, you did this. So what I asked them to do is just say, how do you feel? Make an I statement of how you feel. Well, I feel upset because I feel like I'm not being treated fairly. Or I feel like I'm not being respected. And now we're talking about the emotional aspects. It's not pointing the finger and what you did wrong. It's how do I feel? And you can deal with emotions. That's a much better way to deal with it.
That's amazing, Reverend Jim. What a great reminder. So, Can the trend towards spirituality, but not religious, be our salvation, you think?
I believe that there's something to it. There's an organization called SBNR, Spiritual But Not Religious, and there's hundreds of thousands of people out there being involved in that organization. And I'm, for example, associated with an organization called Unity, which pulls the best from all the religions, but gets rid of all the creeds, doctrines, dogma, traditions, and you're free to be yourself. And that's what spirituality does. Religion tends to try to control to some degree, whereas spirituality frees you. So if you've got a religion that frees you and tells you you're good just the way you are, that's where you want to go. But that's spirituality. Spirit always loves you. Spirit always feels like you're perfect just the way you are. So for me, spirituality is a really good answer to the problems of the world.
You mentioned about your community, Unity community, and I heard it's the Wild Soul Sanctuary. And to me, that screams freedom and sovereignty to express your individual, spiritual practice. And I really resonate with that.
Yeah.
And I think now more than ever, people are just looking for the free expression of their own spiritual being and beingness in that matter. And
Yeah.
so I really like that. It's simple enough to understand, and yet it's very profound.
Yeah, no one wants to be controlled anymore.
Yeah.
We've risen above that today.
Amazing. So can you leave us with some words of wisdom to help make this transformation?
Well, what strikes me and works for me is ancient wisdom, 2,500 years old, Lao Tzu. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he wrote a thing called the Tao Te Ching. And he said, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your destiny. So that's where I leave it.
Thank you, Reverend Jim.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Jim. I really appreciate this amazing, insightful time with you. And I would like to thank our Light Seekers viewers, and please stay tuned to our second series of this podcast, LightPath Transformational Series video. And if you like this content, please subscribe and visit our website with the link below.